That's Chamber Shani. What's the mistake?
Namo
Guru Me Namo Buddhaya Namo Dhammaya Namo Sanghaya Namo Guru Me Namo Buddhaya Namo Dhammaya Namo Sanghaya Namo Guru Me Namo Buddhaya Namo Dhammaya Namo Sanghaya Ma Samaya Me Shiraya Maya Roya Shi Maya Jaya Maya Ga Namaya Kya Moya Voya Ni Soya Soya Raya Re Ye Shaya Shaya Yaya Wa Daya Soya Jaya Ve Yamaya Laya Shaya Chaya Lo Yaya Tha Baya Te Gaya Te Baya Raya Gaya Te Baya Raya Saya Gaya Te Moya De Soha Te Yaya Tha Gaya Te Gaya Te Baya Raya Gaya Te Baya Raya Saya Gaya Te Moya De Soha Te Yaya Tha Gaya Te Gaya Te Baya Raya Gaya Te Baya Raya Saya Gaya Te Moya De Soha. Gare Dondra Jigi Kyung Me Tene Be Jenda Chawa Tan Chimbo Ando Jen Puzo Su Jaki Teja Tandra Tene Oijo Sa Yen Benje Su Me To Chama Rero Lenge Nye De Jambo Ande Sanje Kendo Me Te Bunga Ye Do Kwe Namda King Lo Sheba Sho Ye Dama Guru Re Niya Daya Me Sangje Chedon Zoje Chonamala Sanjo Bando Dane Shabsuche Nage Jojo Jebe Sonamje Roe Benje Yendo Barajo Sangje Chedon Zoje Chonamala Ardo Dane Shabsuche Dage Jojo Jebe Sonamje Lola Pensha Sanje Ando Barajo Sangje Chedon Zoje Chonamala Sanjo Bando Dane Shabsuche Dage Jojo Jebe Sonamje Lola Pensha Sanje Ando Barajo. Majana Tadani Besangi Tangi Tondo, Tozalana Mayanda, Zobi Sanji, Kumbara Majiki, Toba Shago, Toba Shavi Cheto, Tambichur, Majasan, and Bekono, Sanji Semji, say Simigon and Sambration.
Let us all cultivate the altruistic motivation, seeking complete enlightenment for the sake of liberating infinite, kind, mother sentient beings, and with that kind of bodhicitta motivation, that we should all participate in this teaching.
Tangaran so any churchini shabalata, any lamata homanic tone, Gono Nabatava, take governing about the Gogolish.
As we participate in spiritual teaching, such as the one we are having now, it is absolutely necessary for both the teacher and the students or disciples to cultivate proper motivation. We should all participate in the teaching with proper intention or motivation.
That the church thinking that Gono Nabatava Karesana, Drain, Tandori Songa, choosing your moon team in Pinto Soyan that he turns. And your moon is a Gono, your moon is a good church thinking in a Gono, your moon is a one to Mandra, send the way on the Mandroyas. And a church can't hear you church it on that data, or that Mantroach, that he wear that Gachim.
It is stated in Sutra that a teacher or guru who gives teaching should do so with proper motivation. And it's mentioned that a teacher should teach with literally translating undiluted or non-diluted motivation. So in other words, his or her motivation must not be contaminated by any delusion to give the teaching. And so with such a pure motivation, teachers should teach correctly or unmistakenly. In other words, as the teacher explains the meaning of Dharma, he must make sure that he does not give misinterpretation or wrong interpretation. So must give the what we call unmistaken explanation. So just as a teacher needs to teach with pure motivation, pure in the sense that his or her motivation is not contaminated by delusion, and must not teach out of worldly motives, concerned with this lifetime, and teach properly or correctly. In the same way, those who listen to teaching should also listen with pure, undiluted or non-diluted motivation. In other words, that listeners to teaching must not listen to teaching out of some ulterior motives. Something like that has to do with the interest of this lifetime. How can I become famous, in this life? Or, how can I be successful in, making basic necessities of life? So one's motivation must not be contaminated by any delusion. And the proper motivation and the highest kind of motivation that we emphasize here is the altruistic motivation, bodhicitta motivation, seeking complete enlightenment for the benefit of others and oneself. So with that kind of bodhicitta motivation, that both teacher and students should participate in teaching.
Then, that's also how go tired was. Ane tandandi Lam Rim Teachings ne shen sum pang ne yen bab dan zo ne shen sum pang ne hi tu ten ne yen go do was.
I assume that you already know about what is the proper approach to listen to teaching. And what that approach involves is that listeners should be free of, metaphorically speaking, the three folds of a container or a pot. Okay? The three folds of a pot or container. And also adopt 6 types of recognitions, Dushe too. So being free of 3 folds of a container or a vessel, and cultivating the 6 types of recognitions, that is the proper approach with which one should listen to spiritual teaching. So you may have heard, about these matters already, but what I want to emphasize is that so you should remember them. Don't forget what you have already listened to or learned about. So it's important for us to be able to bring these things in on our mind, if you will, as we listen to teaching.
Then around never the was risk on
as I explained the other day, that of the 6 types of what we call recognition, seeing oneself as if one were a sick person, literally translated, as if one is a patient, needs medication. That kind of recognition is very important. So if we, recognize or have this kind of recognition as if as if I am like a patient or on somebody who needs some medication, if that kind of understanding or awareness or recognition is there, then what follows from that is that I really need medicine-like teaching. Okay, so that somehow automatically follows from the first kind of awareness or understanding or recognition.
That the chode that ran making the hiyabi that ran pe never ne nearly tired ched the main zachum zinger the naive thing around so they chode that zachum the gate chamber in but thing about the hakoyungers.
So just as a patient who really feels that, I'm really not feeling well, I'm sick, so I need medication. So such a patient really understands the value of medication, that I really need to get the right medicine and I need to take it, okay, in order to get well. So in the same way, if we were to recognize ourselves as if we were a patient, And so then we will be able to regard Dharma or teaching as the real medication, and we need to apply the teaching to ourselves, which is like taking the medication to recover from sickness.
That chöde den zachimbo yimba ne dosini chesona ane chö da dende nyela ta kalin kangi me bichim chagres.
So as we see the value of teaching, just as a patient sees the value of medication, then I think, relatively speaking, we will be able to cope with any difficulties in search of teaching, to find or to listen to teaching.
That the any they chö choyala chö chorne that chö zeyala ta rang ma hebe de hinge yi denke ji da ani chö zeyala de gange me be chagres ngemange sangi se ma ta dong ge ani di chebi bas logic chebi bas.
So when we really truly feel or recognize how precious Dharma is, just like a medication, then I think somehow that helps us to cope with difficulties that we encounter in search of Dharma, right? So in order to find a Dharma, who really can give us authentic Dharma teaching, in order to find such a qualified teacher, we may face difficulties, but we will be able to put up with the difficulties because we have this understanding or recognition that Dharma is really very precious and is very valuable. So it is in this regard, remember that I told you about the story of great Bodhisattva Sadaparutida, ever-crying Bodhisattva, who went in search of his teacher, Acharya Dharmodgata. So just as his name says it, he was always found crying. So he was called ever-crying Bodhisattva. That's his name. Sadaparutida means always crying. So, of course, we have to understand what is the reason behind why he is always crying. It's not like he's always depressed and sad and crying, but there's a really good reason why he is always found crying. So the reason behind his crying all the time is, he realized the value of the wisdom gone beyond, or the realization of emptiness. Okay? And so he very much wanted to find a qualified teacher who can teach him what emptiness is, who can teach him about the perfection of wisdom, pranjana paramita. So he was really in search of such a teacher, and because of that deep realization of the value of such an antidote, so he was always found crying, So he was always found crying because he was really, in a sense, like a desperate, to find an authentic teacher who could teach him emptiness, show the perfection of wisdom. So then what happens was one day, there was some kind of a voice from the sky. That actually the Buddha, produced that voice because Buddha knew what he really was seeking. And the voice said, don't be sad. You should go in the direction of the east, and you will find a qualified teacher, who could teach you the perfection of wisdom.
I think that same government the party Kelly Cholpa they are called that day, and then there's a song that Nandizani 아니 최땡기가 아니 최땡기 기회니 때 체인 가르치고요나 동시에 가발 교육은 때때 교수 말씀이야 거둥에 때때 때까지 교수 말다 라고 말했잖아요 동네네 아교가레스.
So when we first heard that voice from the sky saying, you know what, don't be sad, just go, keep walking in the eastern direction and you will find a qualified teacher. So he was so happy and delighted, and he just, walked into that particular direction. But then on the way, then he started to feel again sad. He said, you know what, I missed the opportunity to ask teacher, what would be the name of that teacher, and what is his, so to speak, the address, location. I did not ask those things. So I have no name, I have no address. So, would I really ever be able to find a teacher just going into that direction? So he was again sad.
That is that you have to give you what the notion the long time. And don't say penny dance that don't say penny dance. And any Shangus because a church and give him trampas, and those in the Yamalong Tenor.
So then as he was kind of asking those questions in his mind, right, again, his questions got answered, with a voice from the sky. He said, the name of the teacher would be Acharya Dharmodgada Kecheba. And the location where you could find him is called Pyongyedang. Of course, now that's the Tibetan translation of the Sanskrit name, but which seems like the town or the location that somehow has a very sweet fragrance. So it's like almost like sweet fragrance, town.
That is a compa, and then that penny, and it came by use of tea that Tonduki, that don't shake in the level.
So he kept walking and walking, and finally, so he came to that particular location, called Sweet Fragrance, or just literally translating, and so he came to that very place where the great master Acharya Dharmodgada, was present.
That in Pa Malik Hagizamato, the Kong del Payer, Tony Pa, Jangal Pa, Kayishin Tapa, and the Kong Yusele, and Legia, Sonza, translate in the ladies and that Chimpan Yidis and Karipu, beyond of Karipugan, some that Yamatan, Biopia Yamakan.
So he really got to the right location, right? And that it was almost, as Geshe was saying, like maybe a few miles away from really literally meeting the great master. But now he got sad. He said, I have nothing to offer. If I see this teacher, I'm just empty-handed and I have nothing. Now what do I do?
Then call that. 당에 류데 다 제가 토마메바네 최고된다 장 동슈야 말했어. 류데 손에. 안티 린데가 근데 생기서 최발이 최바 피해다 드리시니 세고 삼타 아니 미스뉴 다다. 조랑 빠르 그래 총칸들이 당들이 빠르게서 다스 상랑 빠르네다. 미스뉴 임스. 케이전 유어. So then he realized, okay, I'm in the right location, and pretty soon I will be able to see the great teacher, but I have nothing to offer him. So then he thought, okay, he had nothing else except himself, right? So then he said, okay, maybe I can sell a part of my body, if anybody needed it. So he started to kind of howl to the people of the town. So he said, anybody is interested in buying a human being, okay? So he just kept, just howling that anybody interested to buy a human being. That young girl got my use at that not best known chinchuri samta, and the chimpala pia than shared partisan, but shared church on it, thinking that you appear to shed Marago Luzoni, the shake some that young girl imagine chunte, doing his other,
So of course he thought, how he decided to kind of sell himself, his body, if anybody was going to buy. He said, what, I had been reborn many times, but I never did once, sacrifice my body for the sake of Dharma. So here's a chance. So he was ready to sell his body if anybody is interested in buying a human being. So then he thought he could, get the money or whatever to buy offering for his teacher. But he just kept on announcing, what he has got to sell, but nobody was interested in buying it. Now he became really sad. He said, you know what, I must be really a person with very little merit. Nobody is interested to buy. Very unlucky, very unfortunate person. I wanted to sell my body, sell myself, but nobody is interested to buy me. So I have no way to make an offering to my teacher.
nga translation chuji ki checking is chuji sha da choba pin se tni nyogos ani kon gabrata ani kon temni ta translate chegyo.
So then, because nobody in that town was interested to buy a human being or a part of a human being. But at that time, it is said that Indra, the king of gods, he was watching all the way through, right? So he thought, okay, maybe he wanted to help him. So Indra appeared himself in the form of a Brahmin, right? And he came to him and said, you know what, I'm a Brahmin, so I don't need your flesh because, I don't eat meat, right? I'm pure Brahmin. But I do need some human flesh to do a sacrificial ritual or rite. Yeah, so I would like to buy, a part of your body. Yes. So, of course, ever-crying Bodhisattva was very delighted. At least he found somebody who wants to buy a piece of him. And so he started to cut, flesh from his, thighs and wherever he could in order to, sell.
And then they say the cat to the tribe to the compare token Tumbo Pomotic, Tonga. Should I get that somewhere? Should Pomotic the Tomber?
So when ever-crying Bodhisattva was doing that, literally cutting flesh from his, body, a daughter of a merchant or business, person in today's language, was watching from the rooftop of her, building, and she saw what he was doing.
That moment they say, "Churan this in Karim bus." The Churan they so don't hit train in the Rishi said the Karim bus gadget. That is that, and then changes of Chavasing to you. That the church and just a church that church thinking that the Chavapia, like Kayama says, the tender and transit the chat on us.
So the girl came down, to see him, and she was really interested. She said, why you are doing a self-torture here, torturing yourself. And so then he explained, he said, I came all the way here to meet with a great master, Acharya Damodgada, and I wanted to get teachings from him, but I have nothing to make an offering for the teaching. So this Brahmin is interested to buy, some part of me for sacrificial rites, so I'm so happy. I have this chance to do it. So that's what I'm doing, cutting flesh from my body to sell to this Brahmin.
That moment, that Churang so Nasan de Majes, and then Churang Shans of Champa, Church of a pair, and then that Babatan and Flone, and then Moral Yomongaja, so that Chimuchi and the just then say any Chiba pizza, Tangan in the Shoyungi, and then Chiba Pia to 2 years.
So then the girl was really, very much impressed by his sense of sacrifice and dedication, Bodhisattva, ever-crying Bodhisattva. And she said, please stop, doing that to yourself, and don't worry about making offering to your teacher. I will ask my dad, to kind of arrange for that, or because my dad is a very rich, businessman. And as a matter of fact, she turned out to belong to a very rich family. There was said, 500 maids to serve her. So she said, I would like to come with you to get the teaching, if that's okay. And so we will make the offering, and so you don't have to worry about that.
And then that transit to judging the transit to a city or to a Hini, Tangala and it Google Mess, not judging, and try to pay 그놈 그 넘버 더 버래 엔도 다가 용백이스 다 저랑 그놈 그 넘버 더 버래게 제선 소이자 다 저랑 가르고나 날 아니 초 홍기서 다 가르고나 때 저랑 그 날 럽스
So then when that whole conversation took place, then the Indra, the king of gods, he showed his real nature. You know, he just transformed the Brahmin back into Indra. He said, you know what, I really don't need your flesh. You know, I came to test your determination and your motivation. You know, you really had pure motivation and completely dedicated. So that's what I came to test. You know, I'm not a real Brahmin and I don't need your flesh. And so now I'm convinced by your pure motivation or your sense of dedication. So ask me whatever you want, you know, to present to your teacher, and I'll provide it, you know, to you.
That concept the part of the symbol. That thing is to my telegame, but you teach around the chick, and love that English.
So then somehow the ever-crying Bodhisattva, you know, he said, ask me anything you want, right? Then he said, okay, can you teach me something about the perfection of wisdom? And the Indra said, no, that's not something I can do. You know, just ask me any other things I can provide for you. You know, that's the thing I can't give you. So he already cut, you know, pieces of flesh from himself. He said, you know what, okay, if you can't do that, so why don't you restore my body to the normal, you know, body that I had before, you know, so then that would be your help. So then Indra, you know, by using what we call invoking the power of truth, he said, if you had a pure motivation, which I thought you had, so by the power of that truth, may, you know, you recover, you know, back to your normalcy before. And he invoked the power of the truth, and then the ever-crying Bodhisattva was back to normal, you know. And his body was recovered completely.
That's how 총표고 보모트다 요모 ngaje시 아니 hinda ngajak knowledge kyala de chaba priya de keshi ani changise dadomete delifita chimbatsan. So
then the next day that rich you know girl, I mean she arranged said like 500 chariots of offerings and followed by 500 maids, you know. So this whole entourage went with ever-crying Bodhisattva the next day to see the great teacher Acharya Damodgada.
Ani chempa dosen the chempa jene ta chaba pu de sentan ani pe ani che sung de jane re ani ko pe ta nyamale ta karseng da ta yöntin de ta koni kon de pe da de sung de was.
So of course then cut short the story, so they all met the great teacher Acharya Damodgada and he gave teaching. And because of that whole pure motivation and the karmic connection for many lifetimes, that by listening to Acharya Damodgada's teaching, he really gained realization very quickly. The ever-crying Bodhisattva knows.
That
So after giving some teachings to them, then Acharya Damodgada, he entered into a very deep meditative state for 1 week. So he completely absorbed himself into a meditative state. And then somehow from above, some voices came as if making an announcement. He said, you know what, pretty soon the great master Acharya Damodgada will come out of his deep meditation and then he will give teachings. So now they were all very happy because pretty soon this great master will be out of his deep state of meditation and he would give teaching. So they were preparing for the teaching where they need to kind of settle the dust down. So usually, in those ancient times, is you bring water and sprinkle water, settle dust down. But for some reason, it is said the Maras, or in English, for lack of better word, proper words, we call demons, or the demonic forces. They didn't want teachings to happen. So somehow they used their power, and as if all the waters were not available, just disappeared,
That is that do that conquer division that could say. Then in the chart, this go pay you down with this. Go it that it should never say in the thing, try to take what they pay. That is in that kind of question conquer look up the Jirvata. Do you get the maps called 30 charges on the wish? So
when the Maras or the demonic forces use their power as if to sort of, that nobody could see where the water is, So then the ever-crying Bodhisattva, in order to challenge that, he said, okay, it doesn't matter. If you kind of take control of the water, I still have blood in my body. So I'm going to squeeze out the blood from my body and settle the dust down. That's how he really thought about it, strong, willpower, and with pure motivation, he thought about it.
And then the conversation, shall we check my patient and choose soon, carriage part of the sympathy, that's soon.
So, okay, I think there needs to be a little correction. I think when he went there with the rich girl and the 500 maids and all of them, I think they didn't get the teaching right away because the great master was in deep meditation. So they had to wait 1 week. And then there was this voice announced from the above said, he will pretty soon come out of meditation. And so they were so delighted and they arranged for the teachings. And now the great master was out of meditation, and then he gave teaching on the wisdom gone beyond, or the perfection of wisdom.
That then Kong Chaba patient, carriage part of the sympathy, Kimban to the journey, and they hang dollar doing the same door, with that Kong. That's sad debate. Payment.
I don't know.
Sat Takaran, dental kill.
So it is said that when the great master Dhammadgata started to give teaching on the wisdom gone beyond, the ever-crying Bodhisattva was so ready for the teaching that in one particular session, they said somehow he progressed so fast on the spiritual ground that he pretty much accomplished 7 spiritual grounds of a Bodhisattva in one session, so that was just a tremendous realization that he experienced.
So that I think that can say, Narazo Tende Yamarti in Chuta, that and really any peg Chut Sakim will be nothing about it. And it and that thing you had and the don't take anything yours. Jetoman yours. Jetoman and Bumna, you go to live, Shumbag lives a year, Tadum lives in yours.
No. So the reason I told this story is so that, of course, we don't have the same pure motivation and the dedication and the sense of willpower like Bodhisattva Sataparudita. But at the same time, in the story, the lesson we learn from this story is that to be able to realize, appreciate the preciousness or the value of spiritual teaching. And this story is found in the 8,000 Pranjanaparamita Sutra, if you look in that. Or there is 100,000 verses Pranjanaparamita Sutra, and there's a particular chapter called the chapter on, Bodhisattva Sataparudita. Okay, so you will find the story about him.
Jinju Duji Yanless. When Sanji Gandhi, the Zaba Karanjo, the Narazo, the Yun Joko, that the Mutin Tanya name Chagers, Yams Langi Chagers.
So as we have this wonderful saying in Tibetan, which I don't think I can do justice to capture all the profundity and the beauty of the whole expression, but maybe I can capture the meaning here, is that the life stories of the great past masters, including the Buddha, are actually constitute practice for us. their life is something that we need to cultivate, constitute practice for us, because their life story is full of spiritual teachings or lessons for us to be put into practice. So the story which I told you is also related to one of the 6 recognitions that we as listeners to teaching should cultivate, which is recognizing our teacher as if he were an expert doctor or physician, right? So we have that regard. Just as we appreciate the expertise of a doctor if we are sick and we need good medication, in the same way we have that kind of regard for a teacher. So one of the recognitions is to do with just as like if we are really sick, we need to take the medication consistently for whatever the time, until really medicine works and kicks in and we get, recovered. In the same way, we should have that sense of regard as we apply teaching to ourselves. There has to be consistency in applying the teaching to ourselves until we recover from, so to speak, a sickness of delusions.
Nepal me tegures, me sagurmato, me Yundi Jeba Zanchi Degu Marabas. The Nagres, not to chute, turn and Degu Amar, Turba Zanchi Degu Amari, turning Yanson and Govaris.
So we really need to listen to teaching in order to understand. But then more important thing is we need to apply the teaching to ourselves or cultivate the teaching. Okay, that's the most important thing. And there's this really profound message captured in a Guide to Bodhisattva's Way of Life by great Shantideva. And he gives this wonderful example. He said, if somebody is sick, what use it is if you kind of read the medical text to this person and tell him all the expertise you have in the medicine area. That is not going to do anything to the patient. What can really help the patient is if you give the medicine and the patient takes the medicine, and that's what works. So in the same way, so just as reading medical texts and having a medical expertise alone is not a cure for the sickness. The real cure for the sickness is medication that one needs to take. In the same way, so we need to apply the teaching to ourselves. We need to practice it. If we don't practice it, it is like we just read about things, but we are really not taking the medication. So I remember I'm explaining these things to you before, but because I have a translator today here, so I thought these are so important things, and maybe I will be able to communicate better. So I just re-explained these things.
It
is really clearly stated in the text here. In the Lam Rim, it says, if somebody, can say that, I have received so many teachings, 100 teachings. It's just you can kind of, catalog it. I heard this one, I heard that one, I listened to this one, and then if somebody can make a whole laundry list of the teachings received but never practice it, then he said it really doesn't serve the purpose.
Parango wrote Marabashini, Shumbagali, Parango Shumba Yorba, Shumba Nomotes Yorba, did Sambashene, Anishena, Yagoyama, Karizana, Nyan Chut Herne, that Binyans Malana, that didn't calculate. Parango wrote the road Maraba Sheni, and that Shimbal Namatis you have did some machine that Nick Zom calculate.
So we talked about this example before. I don't know whether I really was able to get the message to you then. Now, it is like, if you don't practice it, it is like somebody wants to taste the sugar cane, but only, how should I say, bites into the bark of a sugar cane, the skin one. Yeah, you get a little sweet taste because the bark has some sugary in it. But you're really not getting the real taste of the sugar cane, which is inside the skin or the bark. So like that, if we listen to teaching, yeah, we do enjoy it, like it. But if we don't put it into practice, so we are really not getting the real taste of the teaching.
Then don't song the Hassan Gwindoles, Porang Hinshu, Porang road Himbo to Yamaris. You may Garis Ron and Nana Dose, Hinshu, Porang Shumba Tel Yamaris, don't the Neza wrote Tewate and Nala Yoris.
So this example is actually, comes from, originally from a Buddha Sutra. And there is a sutra called Paksam Kulvado. The sutra is more like it is the motivational sutra that motivates you and inspires you, about Dharma. So I'm just using the word. It may not work well. It's like a motivational speaker. So it's a motivational sutra here. That's my sense here. And so this sutra really gives this example. If somebody wants to get a real taste of sugar cane, then got to get into the skin of the sugar cane or the bark of the sugar cane. If you just keep biting the bark, you get a little bit of taste, but you really don't get the real taste of the sugar cane. So just like that, if we don't practice Dharma, listen to teaching, we get some enjoyment and satisfaction, but we don't get the real taste of the Dharma.
So
So the real taste of the sugar cane is used as an example to talk about the real taste of the Dharma.
Oh, that day, my Shane, that children quite because that day. And it is third round Mambo sit. Sit the pain and Moko, oh, that the hero didn't do caution, Matapa in and Karina, oh, that the Mambo caution. Go at Sanita, go at the heavy the Hijani, that made the Hingu some. We need to the Hingu, go out to Hingu Amaris. That the days is shabby and any Cheva Chude Canada. And the Chude Canada, Yanka Yoris.
And so he really, I think I probably did not really communicate this idea clearly to you last time. I was trying to get this idea to you, where if we, keep on listening to teachings, like hundreds of teachings, but never put into practice, then as we listen to teaching, we are so good with the words of the Dharma, right? As soon as somebody says impermanence, yeah, I know it, right? And so you get a sense of as if hearing those words of the Dharma, we equate it with a really understanding of the Dharma. Right? Impermanence, yeah, I got it. But we just heard it, the word impermanence. We really didn't understand, realize what impermanence is. So if we don't put into practice the teachings we receive, then we might get terribly habituated into, this is a bad habit, by the way, we're not talking about a good one. We get into listening to teachings, but never putting into practice. So that habit can be very detrimental. It's just like as soon as the teacher talks, yeah, I know it. Yeah, that one I heard it. Yeah, this one I heard it. As if we feel like we know it, but we really don't have the realization of the Dharma. So that's a terrible habit, to have.
Because they Gomjuk Tang Yu Shabinase, today Ju Sumba Tarsundo. Third Mala Gomdan Yu. That one is not Gondan to Tagana Ita Mama Shagu.
So basically, we are going to put the statistics here, right? Then the statistics of listening to the teaching and the statistics of our meditational practice, they must balance it out, right? If we listen to 100 times, we should have practiced meditation 100 times. But if our statistic on the listening, the laundry list is long, 100 times, but the practice list is really short, nothing, right? Then we got a real problem. See that at least our meditation and listening to teaching should match. The better would be more meditation, right?
다 당보 안에 도시 당보 퇴배 채너스 셈나 중세 펜바탄 하양스 당보 퇴비 잔 틱아웃다 때 가란사 틱 셈 펜바제는 다주 퇴니 파 마제나 된도 대인juk 상대 양내 양도 일에 셰파 당스 고버 마제나 대 제송스 데 드레 마제나네 대 제스네 갑이네 다 레 제스 퇴배 가 말레 현잠단 다 아니 다 그래서 그러다 된다래 아니 지알다 가보 맵 차는 것 같아.
So he says, like, we really from the beginning very careful as we listen to teaching, because otherwise while we are listening to teaching, we might get a sense that, yeah, I do understand it, But then if we don't repeatedly contemplate the meaning of the teaching and meditate on it, and then we get into that habit of not contemplating and meditating, but listening to teaching, then after a while, we get disconnected from practice, contemplation, meditation, and then that is a really terrible habit. We like teaching, listen to, but somehow there's a disconnect between us and the practice, the contemplation and meditation. So here it is said that if we listen to or have listened to many other kinds of teachings based on other Dhamma texts for a long time, we really got habituated in listening while not practicing listening and listening. By listening to the Lam Rim teaching, we might be able to bring ourselves around. Okay, so Lam Rim teaching could become a very good antidote to really put this new perspective on the need to practice. But now if we get into habituated, that terrible habit of listening to Lam Rim teaching and not practicing, maybe this habit is incorrigible. We cannot correct it anymore. It's this really terrible thing. Okay? So here it is said that when we listen to teaching, doesn't matter how much we have listened to, a little bit, a little more, a lot, but we must always, contemplate the teaching we have received and meditate on the teaching we have received. These three things, listening, theba, contemplation, samba, and meditation, komba, they must always go together. We have to bring these three things together. Do not divorce them. Do not separate them and split them up, because they always need to come together. Listen to teaching, contemplate the teaching, and meditate on the teaching. So these three things should be applied to any amount of teaching we have listened to. Even if it means a little bit teaching we have listened to, we need to contemplate the meaning of the teaching so that we really understand what this little teaching we have received it really means. So once we have understood the meaning through contemplation, right, thinking, then we meditate on that realized meaning of the teaching. We call it ascertained meaning of the teaching. So we do meditation on that ascertained meaning of the teaching.
Some of those. Yi kena mali domshins. Then drum tembake. Lodi javi juni likanando. Drum di chi javi chance. Nga tudu tsena sangam dos. Teba di dos tebi tsena samba da gomba ni botel sam tangyes. Ani samdi kyo samdi tsani ani teba da gomba dos ni. Nga samdi tsena 퇴곰 니스 퇴바다 곰바니시 나 곰베 chen 안데 퇴바다 삼바니 못 삼ton 딱 예길이 말리바 강은 domba치 낭유스 이 ngaran 절대 랍자이테.
So great Upasaka Domtamba, he said that when I listen to teaching, I'm also contemplating and meditating on it. When I contemplate, I'm also listening and meditating. when I'm meditating, I'm also listening and contemplating. So basically he's saying that in each of these things he engages in, he brings the other two. So he's always keeping listening, contemplation, and meditation always together. Of course, there are a lot more things he said. I think what I just said, maybe we just based on that alone, we can think about how important it is to bring together those three things: listening, contemplation, and meditation.
So the Kong any Marazo can somebody Kong the Yamenani, Kong to Julia Tony, then Marazo's number is.
So one of the recognitions is to regard a Buddha, we call Tathagata, another term, as a sublime or valid person, for lack of a better word in English. Kivutamba, sublime. We could say holy, but the holy these days has become a little quite cheap sometimes, So it's a sublime, realized being. To regard a Buddha or Tathagata as a sublime, Kivutamba, a sublime, hopefully that word means something more than holy, sublime person.
So that Kong those in Lam Tilitani and those Saji Komatova in Sene, Marazo Kong Yul those in contempt in those Yamnesia Chimbina, Saji Komata, Trouble your Marista.
So Shakyamuni Buddha, who is our original historical teacher, he taught everything based upon his own realizations, right? That means, he did it, right? It's like he has done everything. So based on his own realizations, he taught us how we can also become a Buddha like him. So if we follow his way or the journey or the path, then we will never be mistaken, because this should lead exactly to where, he ended up in his journey, the complete enlightened state. So we should be able to reach the same destination. So Buddha has become, we call Tseme Kibu, again the best English word ever produced by all the professors here, is a valid person, very authentic, valid, somebody who can never make any mistake. That's the sense of Tsema, okay, to be a valid person.
And that Nandi Leoni Banella, Damba Lang Condition be Tuesday, the Vitugi communities, Tatins, Nikibuza, Nikibanes on the end of those and those here, and Saji Kumal Matepa, Kumamatopa, Pevatus and Dosini, Kanangaris.
No, the universe again.
That Leoni does it to you communities?
In the great Buddhist treatise called Pramana Vartika, or a valid cognition treatise, Tsema. And in the second chapter, the whole chapter really deals more with trying to establish that Buddha is, after all, the most authentic, valid person. Okay? Because that is based upon the path that he followed or cultivated, which led him to the enlightened state, and that's why he is a valid person. So one of the most important things about that whole spiritual path he cultivated is, that means he became a Buddha by way of cultivating infinite compassion to the infinite state. He cultivated the great compassion and brought it to the infinitude. You see, brought it to the fullest extent possible through the power of familiarization and intimacy. So when that happened, that's where he became the Buddha. Okay. So because his teaching is very valid and infallible, so therefore, because Buddha's teaching, you can investigate, and it's very authentic and infallible. So based upon the infallibility of his teaching, we say Buddha is great, Buddha is valid. Okay, valid teacher.
some because Namdu Sanjay came the Kansum, but the Twingle Duna around Yamsla, Twingle Meduna, and then Yamsla Marta.
So when it comes to the authenticity of the teaching, we rely upon what Buddha himself said or taught us. We do not establish the authenticity of Buddha's teaching and the validity of Buddha based upon because somebody with some extra clairvoyant power said Buddha is great, okay? Or somebody said, he did some miraculous power. So the miraculous power people said Buddha is great, okay? So now he is great. We don't use such reasonings. Those are not the reliable sources. We said Buddha is an enlightened being based upon, as we investigate the teaching, the path he followed, and investigate his teaching is authentic teaching, and it has the complete structure of the path, okay, leading to the enlightened state. So based upon his teaching, authenticity of his teaching, we establish the authenticity of a Buddha as a teacher. So in our case, when we have a doubt about, okay, is this something I can put into practice or not, we always check with what did Buddha say. If the teaching we get, it agrees with, it does not contradict what Buddha said, then we can regard that part of the teaching as authentic and we can follow it. Okay? Otherwise, if something contradicts Buddha's teaching, then we should not follow that. Okay? That's how we talk about authenticity of the teaching. And also, I want to bring this important issue before you, that Buddha's teaching consists of what we call interpretable teaching and definitive teaching. Okay, the Tibetan terms are tangye. Tang means to interpret, interpretable teaching, and nye means definitive teaching. So in other words, we can say, Buddha said it, so I can take at the face value everything Buddha said it. Because everything Buddha said cannot be accepted literally. If we do that, we will run into trouble.
That is hearing was make now may say to make the now year was the major the Tangde to soon now you get Sumina may say at the ranch language the Maris major make me say major make the town to go back in Tony. So as most of you are familiar with the Heart Sutra, right? Pranjana Paramita Hridayam Sutra. So where we get many negative statements in this sutra, right? No eyes, no ears, no nose, no this, no that. Well, Buddha said it. Now, if we take it literally, no eyes, it does not make any sense, right? No nose, no ears. But that's what Buddha really didn't mean to say, So such statements need to be interpreted. There should be authentic interpretation of such statements because these are called, we call interpretable teaching. So in some sense, we have to think about eyes, the organs we're talking about. If we say there are eyes which exist conventionally, but then we can say maybe there are some kind of eyes that don't exist. So eyes which do exist and eyes which don't exist. Maybe that's the distinction we need to know. Yes. So when such says there are no eyes, what they really should mean is there are no objectively existent eyes. There are no eyes which exist from their own side and in of themselves. Okay, there's no independently existent, objectively existent eyes, but there are eyes. So we can talk about eyes which do exist and eyes which don't exist. So the point I'm trying to make is, Buddha's teaching really need to be investigated. There are things which can be accepted exactly as Buddha said it. We call definitive words of the teachings. There are things Buddha said it which require authentic interpretation. Those are interpretable teachings of the words of a Buddha. Buddha himself made it clear. He said, don't accept everything I said it at the face value. No. say in the Purtala Ngai Kans. Say Nanda the Kalam, say Kevat the Dar of the Sipa, Sumchigonis, then say Nanda in but Higo Garis. The Naika and the Sajik Sumbatania, and it's Samas never missed that, and it's the Muguashi, the great Javachine, Gumba Munik Sung at the Karen to Tene, and it's Tagres Kanam.
So there's this famous statement, Buddha made, which he said, Kiron Tagam Kelamki, all monastic or the learned bhikshus and wise people, right? Just as a goldsmith tests the gold, whether the gold is a real gold or a fake one, through 3 different ways, but this is the ancient way of doing it, which is you can burn it, then you can tell whether it's a real gold or a fake one that melts completely. Or you can rub it against something and you can find it out. Or you can cut it. Right? So through burning, cutting, and rubbing it, a goldsmith can tell whether this is a true gold or not. And based upon those tests, the goldsmith said, okay, this is the real one and it's authentic, and this is the fake one. In the same way, you should investigate thoroughly, completely my words, my teaching, he said. Okay? And then based upon thorough investigation, accept it. Which means not just because you respect me. Don't accept my words out of respect for me, but accept it based upon thorough investigation. Now that's a lot of things to talk about. Just as a goldsmith used the 3 ways to test the gold, in the same way, we could use 3 types of valid cognitions. Chamasum. Okay, now we are not probably going to go into all those things. We need to use 3 valid cognitions to test the authenticity of Buddha's teaching. If these 3 valid cognitions establish that what Buddha said is true and valid, then accept it is valid. If they do not establish it authentically, then it's a different matter. So no.
Chamasum said that Tenzin go to this. Riba Tacheshini, Tinguni to the Sumbate, Gumba Karlit, Yen to Teni, Taya, Miama Koran Digni, and a Sanji Suntetak, Unitonic Karen to Tan, Tagishakuris.
So, of course, the 3 valid cognition is quite, complex matters, and I don't think we could, talk about here this time. But the point I want to make is that it is through authentic reasoning, valid reasoning, we call it Junzen, the rational, that we try to establish the authenticity of Buddha's teaching. So what basically means, he says, Buddha said X, Y, Z. Why did he say it? When did he say it? What's the reason behind it? What does it really mean, X, Y, Z? Right? So then we look at the overall teaching of the Buddha, right? This is what Buddha said. Why did he say it? What was his intention behind? How does this teaching fit into overall teaching of the Buddha? He said something else differently. So how do these things match up? So this is all based upon reasoning, the valid reasoning and rational. Okay? So the 3 valid cognitions are part of this reasoning.
Range any Chuni Bissana, Lower Chuni Bissana, and a rank Jutola Santan, rank Sim Santani, Yanguris, Karesna, Chuni Sumbateta, rank Sam Nanju Semke, Chagota thing with the Zogo under the Tashi Shagres.
So as we listen to teaching here, the emphasis is we should also check with our way of thinking. Is my way of thinking, it accords with the teaching, okay? Or is there a disparity between what I think usually and what the teaching tells me, okay? So this is very important to find out. Is it the match between, if you like, our way of thinking and the teaching.
The Rangale and the Dombale Chakwa met Menongan and the Tanis, that you met her, but then Nagike, Chuni because Rang Sembuta, the Chuk Sumba, Chuni Sumbata, Rang Senimbote, Tungum into that same, the showing about the tongue, that tongue rest.
To use another metaphor, just as we use mirror to check whether I need to clean my face or any spots on my face and all those things, right? Because once our face is reflected in the mirror, then we can say, okay, this is what I have got on the face, okay? And then we, clean up, right? This is the whole point of looking into the mirror. In the same way, we use the Buddha's teaching like a mirror and let our behavior and thoughts reflect into the teaching, right? So the teaching, what we say is, what I'm thinking and doing does not accord with what Buddha said it, then we need to modify our way of thinking and behavior. If what we think and what we do go well with what Buddha said it, if this mirror says, okay, you're fine, clean, then that's good news.
And daily any rank shopping new shop 12 something like that. Kitchen child, then some was. Just a day, Namjin, and so just all non Tishani, Singy Dungan, Nankin of the Tonsuna, these Jebe, Singy Tangil, rank Dungate, taking shaving in somebody.
Just give you one example. What we learn from Buddha's teaching is about cultivating, in the first place, what is great love and great compassion, for example. So great compassion is defined as a state of mind wishing all sentient beings to be free from suffering and its causes. Okay? So this is what great compassion is. We learn about it from the teaching. Now in our everyday life, when we see any suffering human being or a sentient being, right, then if we can think that, how nice it would be if this particular being, as well as many other beings who are suffering in a similar way, are really free from their suffering. May they be free from suffering. Then, our teaching and our way of thinking are really in sync, in sync with each other, right? So this is what we should try to do.
Randa ani garse urta ranga dan java chimbo yongi tendi ande danda dubu da shawa karing ne yago shonsna tele haga shonsna sansa ki mato tele ani chadu san sing ma rebos te nai ge se yinda chama lo kande ji yin ne ko shawa kani yago shong dona te nai ji kan shone ki ra ya pore san pe chado me ba shin ta gawa ko ne ba ta tendi shena shamba gonse tele go mas.
So when we cultivate great love for sentient beings, we sincerely wish all beings to be happy, to be endowed with happiness. Okay. Now we have certain experience, not the great love, but in this regard, like people we really feel very close to and dear to us, right? We always wish them to be happy, to succeed in what they do, and they really do succeed. We are all the more happy, right? We say, oh, that's great. That's what we really want them to be happy, and we rejoice in that. So in the same way, we should be able to extend that same attitude towards other sentient beings. When they are really doing well, instead of becoming jealous of them or envious of them or kind of being indifferent to them, we truly rejoice. This is what we want everybody to be happy. Now they are really happy because of their own efforts or whatever the case may be. So we become all the more happy because sentient beings are getting exactly what we wish them to be. They got the happiness. Okay, so this is how we cultivate a great love for sentient beings. So after all, we have got this, karmic connection with all sentient beings. Why we should really feel grateful to them is because they have all been our kind mom and dad. Okay, all sentient beings have been our mothers and fathers. And they have been very kind to us, taking care of us. And so we should be grateful to them for those kindnesses. And when we feel gratitude, in regard to them, then of course that sense of gratitude prevents us from harming them, right? If we're really grateful to them for their kindnesses, so we will not think of harming them or hurting them.
So that Senji Re Tadlik Anit Shavinata Senjila Mipinji Shambata. That didn't like anything, is a good and you share with your wrist.
So based upon that kind of a ground, right, we see the karmic connection between ourselves and all sentient beings. They have become all our fathers and mothers, very kind to us. And now we would like to pay their kindness, and we feel gratitude to them, so therefore we don't hurt them in any way. So based on this kind of connection and understanding, now we can truly wish them to be happy, which is called great love. We can truly wish them to be free from suffering, which is called great compassion. So from these great love and compassion, we cultivate bodhicitta or altruism, seeking complete enlightenment for the benefit of all other sentient beings.
Gomboluduke Tanan Sunger, Karesete, Omar Giton and Sunger. Zeus Sumjesta, Pena me, Miss Sumjan of Trikel Pay, Nisi Tudu, Niril to Inishene, Pay Soajan, Shabale, Shamba Yutam, Gomati, Pinchers. Sing it with Shamba using gone, Pinchers, Ganandus.
Great. Realized Indian Buddhist sage Arya Nagarjuna, in his precious garland or Ratna Avali, said, is that if we were to cultivate great love even for a moment, it would be much more meritorious than if we are going to treat 300 people, twice a meal for a day. That seems like quite a lot of people we are treating, right? But if you cultivate great love, even for a moment, that is much more meritorious than the merit we could gain from treating a large number of people with, food twice a day.
And there's a Semi said, Karesana, Semi give it the Gombina, Semi give it the Gombina. The any pale same of a Yadmabans.
No.
The chant is semi cigarette. Say they what the Jimmer Demachine. Don't the dongs the Jimmer. And Dunga maybe the water Demachine. And they say that you didn't have any to the dominant never say, Tandika, Semi give it the Gombina. And then Socio and those Gomking Javina, tell any pale sets on the Yadmabans, Semes.
The four immeasurables called seme, right? That term itself means that if we cultivate these attitudes even for a moment, the merit, positive energy we gain is immeasurable. That's the sense. Okay? So when we cultivate immeasurable love, which is like we wish, countless sentient beings to be happy or to be endowed with happiness. How nice it would be if all these numberless, sentient beings are happy. Just even for a moment, that attitude can create immeasurable positive energy. There's a sense. Or that if we say, how nice it would be if all these sentient beings are free from suffering, which is a great compassion. Okay? Or we say that, how nice it would be if all sentient beings find true happiness that is free of any kind of what we call contamination, suffering, and everything, which is we call joy. In other words, immeasurable joy. And or we say that how nice it would be if sentient beings find sense of equanimity, is that without, free of attachment to some, anger or hatred towards others, and indifferent attitude towards other people. If they are in a state of equanimity, balanced state of mind, free of all those things, right? So then we accumulate immeasurable positive energy. So that's why the four immeasurables are called immeasurables, because we can gain immeasurable merits by cultivating them.
That the instant around someone look Kejun courage do to begin Monu the Kejun Yamers. Rang share the Putabush. Kama Kajima to Majuna, this baby Tawaya wish Sheni. Jongun using somebody shakers. Dinner worry.
So in conclusion today, I want to once more remind all of ourselves, including myself, that it doesn't matter how much we know or we have listened to teaching a little bit, a little more, a lot more, whatever the case may be. But when we practice, even for a few minutes, make sure that our practice is pure, from the beginning to the end. That our motivation right from the beginning is pure. When we do the practice, it is pure. The middle section is pure. And when we do the dedication, is a pure dedication. So the beginning, middle, and the end, even for a few minutes, everything is done just meticulously and perfectly. Okay, that's very important. Even if it means a little bit of practice we do, but we should do it, purely and completely like that.
That's the one thing I say.
So what I basically did today was, I talked about all of these things before, but I somehow try to kind of bring them together and re-explain these things. So it's like more like a review session,
Okay. That, and then I that church should be given all at any Sanjay Temper, but it doesn't the Nepata. Jawi, which everything is shape of the months of the Japan was to in the middle do you want. Cure drinking show for money 20 shower is in the robot. You did you come to the end of Mitibi to the Kenny, Tenzin Dorjee.
Let us dedicate our positive energy of marriage for the flourishing of Dharma, the source of benefits and happiness throughout the universe. May His Holiness the Dalai Lama and all other great sublime holy beings, may they live long and be successful in fulfilling their visions benefiting sentient beings. May spiritual communities throughout the world and spiritual practitioners from all traditions remain healthy, harmonious, and be successful in fulfilling their spiritual aspirations. May this and other world environments be free of all kinds of unwanted pains and problems, and beings find peace, happiness, prosperity, and spirituality. Last but not least, we dedicate our collective marriage for all kind mother sentient beings to be free from the fears and dangers of two types of mental obscuration, and may we all become Buddhas quickly.
Sanjay Gendo Mede Bo Ye Rokuya Namda King Shebar Sho Edam Guru Rena Mandala Nea Daya Amen. Honors.